Well, God bless you. Hope that all is well with you. And I want to come to you and talk a little bit about the concept of Het-Heru. I want to talk about Het-Heru and ask yourself the question, who was Het-Heru? Who was Het-Heru, and why do we talk about this? And how can we kind of jump into the whole concept of Het-Heru? So I hope that you are doing well. It's been a little while, but coming back at you, I've had a chance to be very busy working on some things. But I want to kind of come back and talk a lot about and a little bit about other concepts and aspects of God that help us manifest and be able to kind of realize the reality of why we're here, how we express our divinity, how do we live ourselves to our full potential, how do we take some of these concepts from a Kemetic perspective and a Cushite perspective and apply it to our lives today. And so the concept of Het-Heru, or Hathor, as the Greeks like to call it, people who like to look at it from that perspective, is a very significant concept that we can talk about. So I want to jet into that, because as I think about that, and I think about who was Het-Heru and how do we jump into it, I really think about the idea of imagination, and I really connect Het-Heru with Biddy Mason. And I'll tell you why, because Biddy Mason, as you probably know, is an amazing figure, an extreme, I think, a person in history. And I've written about her in my book, Stories About Black History, Volume 2. You can find that on Amazon. It is on Amazon. I thank you for those who've purchased it and support. You can find it in Kindle and in hard copy. And then there's the various stories about African-American people and people who I think touched on and lived out in their lives amazing things where their impact has gone beyond their life. And Biddy Mason is one of them. So if you get a chance, check out Stories About Black History. And I think she becomes a significant person because of what she did with her life. And how come we kind of jump into it? And it's really interesting, because as we think about the whole concept of cattle and sacred cows, and there's a whole aspect of that that's important to Biddy Mason's life, and we'll talk about that as well. So I appreciate those who've looked out for Stories About Black History, and is available on Amazon. I appreciate you those for supporting me and just taking a look at that. And I pray that you take a look at it. So let's talk about this. Let's kind of jump into this concept of who is Het-Heru, right? Let's jump into it, because as I think about Het-Heru, as you think about the deities, you think about the various aspects of God and expressions of God that were talked about from a Kemetic perspective. And as you talk about them, as we've mentioned before, a lot of people not so far back in history, at various times in history, were remarkable in terms of their ability to be able to express, in my opinion, different aspects of divinity, different aspects of God. And a lot of times we'll look at this, and we'll think that things happened a long time ago. When you think about Kemetic philosophy and theology, it's all around us, and they're so pervasive that the truth in it, the realism in it, it stretches across time. And I think you can find people in the not so distant past, and even people today, people like you and I, and people who lived a long time ago, really hitting on these aspects of God, these aspects that are divine within all of us, and allow it to bring us to a point where we can express ourselves more divinely, more fully, in a more relevant fashion, if you will, to address the situations that we're facing today. So as I think about that, I think about a number of people. And I think about Biddy Mason up there in the right-hand corner. And I think about her from perspective of Het-Heru. And if you start to think about it, and we'll be talking about Heru most likely tomorrow as well. So if you join us again and take a look at these lives, I'm going to try to be going the next several days if I can, just day after day, just talking about some aspects of God. And we'll be talking about Heru next. But let's talk about Het-Heru, because Het-Heru really kind of represents the house of Heru. And if you're familiar with the Kemetic deities, as well as the stories of Hathor and Set, and I'll kind of put a link down below so you can take a look at that, you're familiar with the whole idea of Hathor being that aspect of God that is present in your life and full of your life and in charge of life when you are living according to your divinity. When you are living according to God's will, you can act and walk in a certain way. You can find that nothing really is against you. There's nothing really that can push against you. There's no friction that opposes God. There's no friction in your life when you're walking in divinity and walking in your purpose. And how do you find that? We'll be talking about that on this channel. How do you find that? How do you stay connected with that? How do you give birth to it, right? And so the whole idea of the story of Hathor and Set kind of helps us set up looking at various aspects of God and being able to apply them to ourselves. And as we start to think about it, we start to think about, where does Het-Heru come in? Because we know that Hathor is the father of Heru, right? And Set is the mother of Heru. And we find various aspects, various people in that story, that divine tale, if you will, talking about how you give birth to Heru and how Heru rises up and fights off his uncle Set and wins back the kingdom. But when you think about Het-Heru, Het-Heru kind of represents the house of Heru, the seat of Heru, the place that Heru is housed in. And you think a lot about, you see a lot of things about deities and ancient Nessie and ancient pharaohs, ancient kings their names being represented in a house. You can see a similar type of glyphic, if you will, when you look at Het-Heru. And you think about Het-Heru as being really the house of Heru, the place where Heru was born. And we start to connect that. If you take a look at one of the videos I did before Egypt, you'll find it on my channel. Just one of the videos of the feature there. You notice that we talk a lot about the divine cattle. You know that ancient Kemetic people in the Nile Valley, before there was a Kemet, right? Well before there was an ancient Kemet, well before a lot of these places that we talk about now that are famous in Kemetic history and Kushite history, there were people in the Nile Valley, who were venerating cows. You can go back to Nabta Playa thousands and thousands of years ago. You can find people venerating cow, and people all up and down the Nile Valley. It isn't just one part of it. It's all up and down the Nile Valley that are looking at it. And you start to kind of pull up and down there, whether you're talking about A group Nubians or you go down to Nabta Playa or Kerma, and you go back thousands of years ago, probably even tens of thousands of years ago, you can see that Kemetic people and people of the Nile Valley were venerating cattle. And obviously there was a period of time where the Sahara was grassland. This wasn't always a desert, given the cycles in the climate and the ups and downs and in the temperature, if you will, as well as just the wetness of the area. You had a period of time thousands of years ago where the Sahara was a grassland. And at that time you found many people able to raise cattle in very significant ways. But imagine being in a situation where you have a grassland, you have cattle, but things start to dry out. Things start to get increasingly drier. And there are periods of severe dryness, periods of not so dryness, and then periods of severe dryness. Again, when you talk about the Sahara Desert, people who were able to raise cattle at that time were very significant, very, very specific about the importance of the cattle, very significant about the holiness of it, very significant and very intentional about looking at cattle from a standpoint of it providing life, of it providing almost like a walking grocery store, whether you provide, liquids and nourishment in that way, food and birth, giving birth to other cattle. You start to see that it's not only looked at in terms of very practical ways, but in very spiritual ways. And you will find that Het-Heru, when you take a look at Het-Heru, Het-Heru is represented as a cattle. You find her as a cow-headed, if you will, a cattle-headed deity, and that is in a way of respect. It is a way of looking at the sacredness of what that cow brings forth, or what that cow brings forth. When you start to think about it, not only was Het-Heru, represented as a cow, represented as a cattle, female cattle, if you will, or cow, you would find that, a lot of times the pharaoh, the king, the Nessie would be reflected as a bull. You see in the Kushite, story of Pianki, which I have in my book, Religion of the Backland, where he talks about himself being the strong. He was his mother was the cow who gave birth to a bull. You find them respecting bulls and respecting female cows and respecting cows, if you will, and respecting cattle in general, all throughout Kemetic history. It's a respect, and it's an idea of what it brings forth. And obviously a cow is going to be very significant because it's going to bring forth children. It's going to give birth to what you're looking for in terms of what would be significant in your life, the riches in your life. And a lot of times, if you were, a cattle-based society, having a lot of cattle, made you rich. It made you significant. It made you be able to have a family and to have people and have institutions and kind of be somewhat in an area that's kind of settled as you begin to manage these cattle. And giving birth to that becomes significant. How you give birth to that becomes significant. So Het-Heru is like the house of Heru. It's that which gives birth to Heru. So what is Heru? And let's talk about it. When I think about Heru, I connect a lot of this to the Shabaka stone. And I've talked about the Shabaka stone a lot, and where King Shabaka talks, the Kushite King Shabaka talks about whatever you hear, whatever you see, and whatever you breathe upon will feed into your heart, and it makes all your beliefs come forth. So stop for a second and think about Heru, that aspect that is, the divinity of Asar joined with the divine discipline of Set, giving birth to your will, giving birth to your courage. Think about Heru as courage. Think about Heru as that thing, that aspect of you, that energy in you, where you begin to face the things that you're afraid of. You begin to face the challenge in your life. Everybody in the world, all of us are going to have challenges. Everybody's going to have challenges. If you think about Black history or things you may see in history that you like and people that you think may be remarkable, a lot of times there are people who face significant challenges and they overcame them, in your opinion, right? In our opinion, they overcame them, and that's remarkable to us. We say they're a hero, like an Heru. They're a hero. But really what we're talking about is developing that energy in you, that courage in you to face the life's challenges that you face. That's really, what are you facing? That courage kind of goes along with your will, the ability to stand up and do something about it. So if you stop and think about the Asarian tale, and you think about Asar being that divine aspect of God that's in control of your life, how you live your life when God is in control, when you are living out your divinity, that's what Asar represents. Aset represents that part of you that is divine discipline, that never gives up, that is perfect in prayer, that understands that the connection with the divinity comes through prayer, it comes through meditation, and consistently, never giving up, living a life of discipline. And discipline doesn't necessarily mean completely sacrifice or the way people like to look at it. It can mean all of that, but it means having the ability to understand the things you need in your life to make you successful and the things you don't. And having the discipline and the will to do those things, to only include in your life the things that you need. Imagine having a field that you grew things in, and you threw stuff in your garden that was not needed, things that were not needed to help your garden grow, things that actually took away from the flowers and the fruit and the various things that you wanted to grow in your garden, the vegetables you wanted to grow. A set represents that discipline, that kind of energy and that kind of commitment, who says, I know what it takes for me to be successful. I'm in tune with it, and I'm willing to keep doing it until I give birth to that part of my life that will allow me to address the things that I'm dealing with. And a set, in all the stories that we tell, and all the stories that we read about Asar and Set, the brother who takes over the throne, we find that our Set is always able to defeat Set, is always able to overcome Set, because she's perfect in prayer. She's perfect in meditation. She's perfect at understanding, this is what I need to do to be successful. I'm not going to add to it or subtract from it, and I'm going to continue to do it. When you marry those two things together, you're living in your divinity as God would have you be, and your divine discipline committed to those things that make you successful in life. You give birth to courage. You give birth to your will. What is your will anyway? What does the will mean? The desire to, I'm actually going to make this happen. When you begin to exercise your will, and I think a lot of people talk about this, and they talk about this from a Kemetic standpoint, but maybe not really understand, or maybe not really dig a little deeper in. You can actually do the things you want to do in your life. You can actually establish your will. You can actually make things happen in your life, but it's not, just as simple as, I'm going to think it so. It's actually aligning the parts of your spirit and the energies in your spirit to make yourself do the things you need to do, to make yourself have the courage, to give yourself the energy, which is the energy that moves us to align the things in the universe to be on your side, to accomplish what you want to accomplish. That's what our Kemetic people were talking about. That's what they were talking about. You're talking about being able to do things that seem heroic, right? And so Heru represents that aspect of you, that divine aspect of you that's given birth to, that courage that's given birth to when you marry divine discipline with divinity in your life and living out that divinity. You start to develop the courage and the will to do things that you thought maybe were impossible. You begin to achieve things that you might think were impossible. You begin, and that's what a hero does, right? A hero looks at things that you think might be impossible, right? That's what you do. God bless you. I'm Nefertiti. I very much appreciate it. God bless you. Thank you. I just want to say peace to you too very much. I hope that you guys are doing well. Thank you so much. God bless you. Thank you much for joining. Thank you so much. I appreciate it. God bless you. And so as you think about it, you begin to give birth to those things in your life that you want to that you want to accomplish as you start to do this. And you start to realize that everything that you do has an energy to it. Everything you do has a vibration to it. You see a lot of people, and I think a lot about Muhammad Ali. One of the reasons is because he declared himself to be the greatest. He came on the scene saying, I'm a bad man. I'm the greatest of all time at a very early age. And I remember looking at some video of him early on in his career, not beating some people, right? And declaring himself to be the greatest of all time. And Joe Louis was one of the commentators, the famous Joe Louis. And Joe Louis kind of downplaying what Ali was saying, downplaying his greatness, right? Excuse me. And I thought to myself, wow, Joe Louis had no idea that Ali was right, that Ali was declaring from the very beginning what his end would be, what his destiny would be, what he felt about himself. And thinking about that, there was a rhythm to what he did. There was an energy. Ali was declaring himself to be the greatest. And he was able to meet a lot of his challenges, whether it was Joe Louis, and he had challenges with Joe Frazier, and he had challenges with Joe Frazier, or George Foreman, or Ken Norton, all of whom were significant fights, and some of whom he fought more than once. But there was a rhythm to what he did, and there was an energy to it. When you start to realize there's an energy to everything, when you start to be able to develop your Heru, that courage, you understand that I'm not just fighting this or dealing with this challenge from a standpoint of I have to push through it. There's actually an energy. There's actually an excitement. You think about people who do amazing things, whether they're doing karate or they're going to do a football game or they're doing like Ali, pumping themselves up before they go do something that's going to be challenging. They're literally drumming up, literally dealing with the energy that's associated with being able to face this challenge, because there's an energy to everything. And I think that as I think about a lot of people around the world who have different ways of connecting with God, I think you will find a lot of people in Africa, in particular West Africa, do a lot with and focus a lot on drumming up, managing, dealing, nurturing, bringing forth the energies that you need in life to make things happen. They understand that and they deal with it. And I think that it's important to have a complete look at it when you think about spirituality, but realize that everything is an energy. Right? If you get up in the morning, you fired up and you pray and you've done your mantra, you've prayed, you've given to God, you're going to meet that life's challenges with energy. And you're going to find challenges. Somebody's going to come to you. Something's going to try to stop you. Something's going to come away. But when you learn how to deal with that challenge with a certain energy, overcome it and still be at peace, man, you made something happen. Man, your day feels great when you don't allow things to come into your mind to make you change that energy, because it's the weather in your mind, it's the climate in your mind that makes a difference, right? So that's where Het-Heru comes in, because we've talked about Het-Heru being the house of Heru, right? Being that part of Heru that helps to give birth to Heru, and Het-Heru being like a cow, if you will, that gives birth to a bull, a cow that gives birth to your courage. Think about that, because that's exactly what Bianca said. A cow that gives birth to a bull, a cow that gives birth to a certain energy, a strength in you, a courage in you, an ability and a will to go do what you need to do. And one of the things that we connect with Het-Heru, we connect your imagination. We connect. How do you continue to nurture Heru, even when Heru was little, even when your courage is little, even when Aset was nurturing her son, when she had her son in the story, she has her son and she's hiding him away from his evil Uncle Set, and he is and she's nurturing him in the woods and in hiding under the guidance of Tahuti, under the guidance of God's will, God's purpose and wisdom. She's nurturing. How do you nurture when your courage is little? And when you think about it, we connect Het-Heru with your imagination. Imagine you're working on this. Imagine you have a daily routine and a daily divine discipline where you're committed to prayer, you're committed to nurturing your spirituality, you're committed to nurturing your mind and having a good climate in your mind, you're understanding your divine purpose and you're willing to live in it, you're willing to commit yourself to it, and you begin to see peace and different things happening in your life, and you start to realize that the courage that I'm developing is still growing. And even when you think you get there, even when you think that you've arrived, right? Understand that you still need to nurture it. Nobody reaches the heights of heaven, if you will, and perfection that they want to reach. There's always room to grow. So never think that you got there and you can stop doing the things that got you there, right? But Het-Heru becomes that ability to have this divine imagination, using your imagination to help you nurture your courage, using your imagination to help you nurture your will to do things you want to do. And one of the most important things you do is not allow other things, other people, other ideas, other opinion to come into your mind, if you will, change the climate of your mind and start to make you doubt. Change your energy. Literally, when you allow other things into your imagination, the things that you imagine on, the things that you kind of mantra on and you think about and you meditate on, those are the things you're giving birth to. And it's so important then to realize that what I see, that imagination is significant, because when I'm nurturing my courage, when I'm nurturing, my energy, when I'm nurturing, I really don't have time. I don't know about you, but I don't have a lot of time. I don't have time to waste on things that are not pushing me forward in my life, things that are not giving me peace, things that are not giving me joy, things that are not telling me that things are okay and I can overcome this. People are looking at, things with Trump or politics. I don't have time for things that tell me that I can't do or it's not possible. That's ridiculous. History is full of people who have done it, right? History is full of people who've made amazing things and accomplished amazing things when other people said they couldn't. History is full of it. Don't just stop and think about, well, things are challenging. Understand that many people in your life and in your bloodline and in your heritage and in the long lineage that is African American and just in general have dealt with things that are difficult, right? And one of the things you do to help manage this purposely, right, intentionally, in your awareness is to understand that your imagination or your Het-Heru becomes significant when you're giving birth to and nurturing your courage, and it becomes a significant part of keeping it. Because you can change your energy like that when you allow negative things to get into your imagination. When you allow yourself to literally meditate. Think about meditation as like taking in a thought. It's like taking a seed and an energy. It's like taking a seed and putting it in your heart. Think of meditation like taking a seed and putting it in your heart. And the more time you spend thinking on that seed is the water you're giving it. It's the sunlight you're giving it. You're planting it in fertile soil, which is your mind and your spirit, and you're giving it water and sunlight. But when you do that, if you plant a negative seed, you're letting that negative seed grow. You're letting those weeds grow. If you plant a positive seed, you're letting positive things grow. And it talks about a lot from a Kemetic standpoint. You hear them talk about Het-Heru, and you hear talk with stories about Het-Heru, where Het-Heru kind of has a nasty side. Where Het-Heru, when she thinks that mankind, there's a story of the destruction of mankind, when she thinks that mankind is kicking back and getting, above their heights, if you will, thinking, pumping up their nose to God, if you will, she becomes, tells her father, if they're messing with you, I'll kill them. I'll destroy them all. I will wipe them out in their blood. And Ra ends up having to reel her in, because she becomes, when she gets mad, she gets mad. And she goes on a tirade to basically destroy mankind. What that means is, when you are sowing seeds spiritually and purposely in your life, if you allow yourself to imagine negative things and the wrong things in your life, that can quickly get out of the way. That can quickly take you off of your track. You can look up and find, what happened? How did I get here? Like, how did I allow myself to make these decisions? Or how did I allow myself to get in this situation? What happened, right? And you start to think about, when did I change my mindset? When did I start to allow myself to start to think about negative things or things that were outside of my divinity? It's very easy to allow yourself to be kind of moved off when you allow yourself to think on and to meditate on negative things. And that's why it becomes so significant when we think about Het-Heru, is to allow yourself to have positive images of yourself, to understand the context of your divinity, and to understand that your imagination and the things that you meditate on are literally like seeds that you plant in your heart. You're planting them in your life, and you're giving them water to grow. And so as I think about that, I think about Het-Heru, and I think about Biddy Mason. I mean, I told a story about it because, as I mentioned, I wrote about her in my book, Stories About Black History. And Biddy Mason, you may be probably familiar with her story. You know that she was enslaved in the 1800s, by horrible people. God bless you, Team Z. I hope that you are, in you, right? Inside of you. A hero lies inside of you. You're absolutely right. A hero lies inside of you, right? And so a lot of people don't get that your hero, that your savior, that God that is coming back through you. I mean, if we can stop and just take it for a minute and just kind of back up, and I thank you, Team Z, for putting that comment there. Just stop and take that. Let's just breathe on that. Even before we talk more about Biddy Mason, let's talk about that, because the idea of God coming back, the idea of a savior coming, is coming through you. A lot of people are sitting back and they're waiting for something to happen. Somebody magical to come, somebody to get elected. Somebody to come, I don't know, riding on a horse, or somebody coming in some type of magical way, a leader, or anybody who will come and then change everything or galvanize. And there's certainly been times where we've had, charismatic, wonderful, remarkable leaders. But when you look at the history, and it's a lot of you do and have read, it's never one person, right? Martin Luther King is not Martin Luther King without the Montgomery bus boycott at the very beginning. And that's thousands of people standing up, and they weren't just standing up for him, they were standing up for themselves, right? It doesn't matter who you point to in life, whether it's Martin Luther King or Malcolm X, or you want to talk about aspects of the civil rights movement or various things. As people, the savior, the change that you're looking for is coming through you. And I really think that's one of the messages that come out of this whole election and the whole presidential election and things that have changed. I think the message is that it's coming through you. I literally think that's it. I think that a lot of people are waiting to see that we're going to galvanize, that we're going to elect a certain person. And that's great, because I certainly wanted that person to be elected, but that we're going to elect, that things are going to happen. We're going to galvanize and we're going to put our stuff in it. And we really don't have to work on some of these aspects of our spirit that we've been talking about. We don't necessarily have to work on, our soul or our divine discipline or our morality. These are the things that are going to bring about the changes in your life. These are the things that are going to bring about the changes in our lives. It's not some one person sitting in the presidency or sitting somewhere who's going to make it happen. You are going to make it happen. You and I are going to make it happen. It's incredible. And the idea, just think about it. Think about it. Any major change that's happened in America and in various places around the world, they happen through people. Everyday people like you and I who galvanized, who caught on to an energy, who caught on to something that meant something to them. Whether we're talking about the Black Lives Matter movement, we're talking about things that there were many, many people that have changed. There are many businesses and many, many people said, I will never do this. We're never going to change the name of this. We're never going to change this. We're never going to do that. The Black Lives Matter movement happened and they changed like that. They changed in a matter of a summer, right? And there's a lot more that goes to it. And there are a lot of people whose lives were lost and a lot excuse me, a lot of crazy things that were done and harmful things that were done to people. And the response to it, and the response that, this is not right and we're going to stand up to it, was a remarkable response. And it brought about change in a way that many people were not able to deal with and not able to remember or able to handle. It brought about change in a certain way that let us know that individuals are the ones that are channeling this energy, the energy that's going to come through us to make our world better. And not just the world, but your life, right? Nobody else is living your life but you. You came into this world as an individual, most likely, and you're going to leave as an individual. Excuse me. So nobody else is living your life but you. Nobody else is helping you. It's not just the world. It's not just your country. It's your community and it's your life. So as you start to think about, how am I going to make the changes in my life? What I'm saying to you is, this is how you do it. That the whole idea of developing your divine discipline, like our set represents, being able to be committed to things that are good for you, being able to be committed to prayer and mantra. That's what the Cushite people were talking about. That's what the Kemetic people were talking about. That's what Shepin Wepet II was talking about when she was God's wife of a man and the head priest, high priestess at Ephesus, in the 8th century BC and the 7th century BC. That's what she was talking about. This is what they were talking about. They were living a divine life, and they said your morality was connected with your ability to be divine. That you literally, we talk about catching more flies with honey than you do with vinegar. You literally have more energy. You literally have more of the universe on your side. You literally have more power when you are moral. You literally have more power when you are good. You literally have power not only to move nations, but to move yourself, to move the things in your life. Our ancestors were telling us that. That's why they had the 42, declarations of innocence. That's why a lot of their teachings of Ptah-hotep, that's why the Shabaka stone, there were so many things talked about how you lived your life in service to God in a way that was moral, right? So as we start to think about are set in terms of divine discipline. And we think about Asar being that aspect of yourself when you were living out your divinity, when you're actually living this and breathing this there. And then we bring in Het-Heru as an aspect of it, of how do you deal with your imagination? How do you begin, once you start on this journey and you start to have things kind of moving forward, how do you begin to keep it going? How do you begin to nurture your courage? How do you begin to nurture your will? How do you begin to nurture your hero? And you start to realize that your mind, which I believe is just an aspect of your spirit. I mean, we're all spirit. I believe we're just this is just, one part of the same continuum, just like, rainbow. You can have the objective reality and other parts of reality that are less objective, more subjective, more subtle, if you will. And you can go to everything from your body and very objective physical things to things that are very subtle, that are hard for us to interact with and feel on a physical level. But it's all part of it. And your mind, I think, is just an extension of your spirit. That's lit. It's kind of like in between the very physical part of your body and the very spiritual part of your life, that your mind is just an extension of your spirit. And you start to realize that your mind then should be in service of your spirit and should be in service of your body, your physical nature, the whole part of you, to do things that's best for you. Your life and your faculties and the abilities that you have should be in service to do what's best for you, so that you can be healthy, so you can live your best life. And so using your mind to think about, to mantra on, to meditate things that are healthy for you, that encourage the climate in your mind to be positive and to be good and not to be negative becomes very important. Because I promise you, if you think negative things, you're going to start to feel fear. And it doesn't mean you aren't going to feel fear and doubt and other things, but I'm saying you're going to nurture fear. You're going to nurture the ability or the inability to do the things you need to do if you think on those things. But if you think on positive things, you're going to be able to take that many more steps. You're going to be able to take baby steps. And I don't care if you take baby steps or giant steps or whatever kind of steps you take. If you're going to, climb a mountain, you got to do it one step at a time. Right? You're going to have to take some kind of step. And it doesn't matter to me whether, like I said, they're big steps or leaps or babies. Just take the steps in the right direction. And when you take the steps in the right direction, you'll be closer and closer to your goal. You're eventually going to get there. You're eventually going to get there. And your mind becomes a significant part of what you think about. What you meditate on is a significant part of developing that courage, which is what Heru is. It's a significant part of developing that courage that you need in you to do what you need to do. So I just wanted to share that. I'm interested to see what your comments down below. What are your comments around courage? What are your thoughts about Het-Heru? How do you begin to nurture this courage and this will in your own life? How do you begin to be intentional about it? How do you begin to be aware of it, right? Because what I'm talking about, I think it's an awakening. I'm talking about an awareness of it, not just kind of doing this haphazardly, understanding that, my mind really does need to be focused on things that are important. There's a significant reason why reading is good for me, why reading affects me in a way that maybe no other medium does. And maybe I should spend more time reading. It's a significant way that prayer impacts my life. Being aware of how these things impact you, then you start to get into the level of our ancestors. You start to get into the level of people who were dealing with these aspects of the spirit in very intentional and very aware like ways, if you will. So I just wanted to talk about and hone in on that whole area and love to hear your thoughts about courage. How do you develop the courage? How do you nurture the courage in your life to do the things that you want to do? So I just wanted to share that. God bless you. I'll be back with you soon with more. And thank you so much for listening. Please tell somebody about it. Talk to you soon. God bless you. Yes, we can because they did. I appreciate it. I like that.